I have never met President Trump, never had a conversation with him. I do want to get to Strzok and Page in a second, but Jason, initially I took that as a compliment. I'm a huge Ric Flair fan, so anytime somebody says you're part of the Four Horsemen, I thought it was a compliment. It was my wife who later said, I think he's talking about those four guys from the book of Revelation, so that's not a compliment. Let me tell you this about Adam. Adam's had a terrible last couple of years. He wanted to be the Attorney General under Hillary Clinton, and no one in the country worked harder to protect her than Adam Schiff. He wanted to be the head of the CIA. He wanted to run for California and run for Senate in the People's Republic of California, but he couldn't win either of those seats. So now he wants to be the chairman of the House Intelligence Committee. Speaking of the apocalypse, Adam Schiff wants to be the chairman of the House Intelligence Committee. If you ever have, I don't know, a couple of free months with nothing else to do, I want you to go back, Jason, and think of all the things you would not know if you had taken Adam Schiff's advice. You wouldn't know the spontaneous reaction to a video was a hoax in Libya. You would never have read the first Chris Stevens email. You wouldn't know that Hillary Clinton had this unique email arrangement with herself because Adam Schiff did everything in his power to keep you from finding out. You wouldn't know about the dossier. You wouldn't know who funded it. You wouldn't know it was used in a court proceeding. You wouldn't know about Strzok and Page. In fact, you wouldn't even be having a show tonight. You wouldn't be having a show about Strzok and Page if Adam Schiff had had his way. So, look, if they secede from the union and President Maxine Waters wants to make him the Attorney General in California, more power to him. Otherwise, I don't think anybody on my side of the aisle gives much of a damn what Adam Schiff thinks.
Well, he certainly gets out there and says it a lot, whatever it is he's saying, but he has, I think, misled and misused that position from my own personal vantage point time and time again. Now, coming before you, though, is this Peter Strzok. As I recall, he originally said he would voluntarily testify, that he wanted to get out and tell his story, but then you heard his attorney in that clip say that he may not show up.
Well, I'm certainly sorry if anyone hurt his feelings last week during the 13 hours we spent. But the only thing I did was go over what he had written. So if he's offended with things that he wrote. He wrote a lot of text. There are emails. It's an unprecedented level of animus. So, of course, he's going to be asked, what did you mean? I can't use all of the words on a family-friendly show like yours, but what did you mean by blanking abysmal? What did you mean by blanking this? We went through all of his texts. Here's what's important, Jason. He's supposed to be investigating Hillary Clinton for potential violations of the Espionage Act. In March of 2016, when he's supposed to be investigating her, he hadn't even interviewed her yet. He thinks that she should win the presidency 100 million to 0. Jason, she wasn't even the nominee at the time. They didn't even have a Republican nominee at the time. But she's going to win 100 million to 0 in March of 2016. And this, according to the guy who's supposed to be dispassionately and objectively interviewing her. Then in July, when the Russia probe started, he is saying terrible things about the very person he's supposed to be objectively investigating. And then we get to the Mueller probe. You know, I mean, he's been on all three. Hillary Clinton, Russia probe, Mueller probe, until they found this text. He's talking about impeachment even before the House Democrats and MSNBC were talking about impeachment. He hadn't been on the case 3 days before he's already talking about impeaching the president. So, of course, we're going to have a lot of questions for him, and some of them might actually be uncomfortable. But he's going to come before a public hearing, whether his lawyer thinks he is or not. He's coming. I'm sure he would rather go in front of Adam Schiff. That's what I read. He'd rather go in front of Adam Schiff. They got a lot in common. They both wanted Hillary Clinton to be president. I get why he wants to go there. But he's going to come before our two committees, whether he wants to or not.
Well, you know, look, Peter Strzok did not have an insignificant job. As I like to say, he didn't work for the Fish and Wildlife Department. He was the #2 person in counterintelligence for the United States Federal Bureau of Investigation. They have tens of thousands of people to choose from. Have you been able to find out why is it that he was selected or appointed to go be on the Mueller probe?
Well, you got to go all the way back to Clinton. He was on the Clinton probe. And then in July, not only was he on the Russia probe pre-Mueller, he was the lead agent on the Russia probe pre-Mueller. So in July of 2016, we just gotten through Jim Comey with that unprecedented press conference. And 3 weeks later, He's working on Donald Trump's campaign and the Russia probe. I think that group was then transposed over onto the Russia probe, and then many of them were transposed over onto the Mueller probe. I will give Mueller credit for this. The moment he found out about these texts, he got rid of Peter Strzok. But here's what you ought to be asking yourself. If it was bad enough for Bob Mueller to get rid of him, the moment he found out about the text, these texts weren't written in March of 2017. They were written in March of 2016. So he never should have been on any of these three probes. If the animus was enough to kick him off when you found it, the animus should have been enough to kick him off when he said it, which was early in 2016. Completely the wrong person. The FBI's reputation, look, there are lots and lots of fantastic FBI agents, 99.9% of them. But to pick this person, and not just him, Lisa Page and other heretofore not identified FBI agents. You remember when Jim Comey, I think you were in the committee room, when Jim Comey said the FBI didn't give a hoot about politics?
Yeah.
Go read these texts. They gave a lot more than a hoot about who was going to be the Democrat nominee and whether Donald Trump would win.
Well, real quickly, because I only got a few seconds, Lisa Page was on the other end of those texts. What's going to happen with her?
She's coming too. I mean, I heard your guests that were on before me, Jason. I just disagree with them. I think anytime you have a chance to spend 12 hours with a witness, you ought to spend it. I get 5 minutes with Peter Strzok in a public hearing. Yeah. I got 10 hours with him last week. So we're going to interview her, and then I hope we have a public hearing with her. But it's more important to me that all these questions get asked on the record. Talk about, I mean, if you want a serious investigation, pick the 10 hours over the 5 minutes is what I would tell my fellow citizens.
Yes, and they need to get the documents from the Department of Justice. Trey Gowdy, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Now, with the latest is Fox News correspondent Kristen Fisher. Kristen, good evening.
Hey, Pete. Well, President Trump told reporters on board Air Force One tonight that his shortlist has shrunk to 4, and he thinks that he's narrowed it down to 2 or 3 finalists. Now, our sources tell Fox News that those finalists are 3 appellate court judges, all of whom are widely regarded to be constitutional conservatives. They are Brett Kavanaugh from the D.C. Circuit, the 6th Circuit's Raymond Kethledge, and Amy Coney Barrett of the 7th Circuit. Now, Kavanaugh is kind of the steady Washington insider. The 53-year-old sits on the same powerful court that served as a stepping stone for 3 current Supreme Court justices, as well as the late Antonin Scalia. He clerked for retiring Justice Kennedy, and he has deep ties to his former boss, President George W. Bush. Another former Kennedy clerk, Judge Raymond Kethledge. The 51-year-old is known for being a bit of a loner. He's less high profile and has less of a judicial record than Kavanaugh, but he's also a lot less controversial, which could help him get confirmed, help him get through the Senate. And then there's Amy Coney Barrett, the only female finalist, we believe. She has 7 children. She clerked for the late Justice Antonin Scalia, and she's a devout Catholic. But her writings on overturning judicial precedent have raised a red flag with a very critical Republican Senator, Susan Collins, who fears that she might overturn Roe v. Wade. Now, President Trump says he hopes to make his decision by Sunday. Then on Monday, a big primetime announcement at the White House, something he made official during that rally tonight in Montana. Listen here.
If you turn in Monday at 9 o'clock, I think you're going to be extremely happy with this election, right? I want to thank Justice Kennedy for his lifetime of truly distinguished service. And he had confidence in me. He left because he said, you're going to pick somebody great.
But Democrats say no one on the president's shortlist is great. They're now putting the pressure on 2 key Republican senators, Lisa Murkowski and Susan Collins. One liberal group is planning to spend millions of dollars on advertising and activism in the senators' home states, Alaska and Maine, which is the exact same strategy that they used to help defeat the Republican effort to repeal Obamacare last year. But of course, Pete, this is going to be a much more difficult fight for the Democrats to win.
You're right. Pete. Some precedent there. Kristen, thank you very much. Appreciate it. As we mentioned, Democrats, they're throwing the kitchen sink at President Trump's Supreme Court candidates. None more than at Judge Amy Coney Barrett. You can't put it any other way. An incredibly qualified U.S. Court of Appeals judge who is a devout Catholic and a mother of 7 children. The left's hypocrisy on her is so thick you could choke on it. Joining us now with reaction is Carrie Severino, Policy Director of the Conservative Judicial Crisis Network and a former clerk for Justice Clarence Thomas, along with attorney and radio talk show host Leo Terrell. Thank you both for joining us this morning. Carrie, let me start with you. So the criticism of Amy Barrett and knowing how accomplished she is that, well, she may be just too devout of a Catholic, yet the left has, usually sees a qualified female candidate, and especially someone who's already been confirmed with 55 votes, as someone who would be, yet again, breaking the glass ceiling. Why the resistance to Amy?
Well, this is really ridiculous because under our Constitution, there is no religious test for office, and that's what they're trying to do here. What I think is happening is you're seeing people like Senator Feinstein who are very threatened by an accomplished, articulate, but conservative woman, because that really puts the lie to their identity politics. She does not toe their line and their feminist idea of what a woman should be, and she understands how to defend her positions. So I think that's someone they feel very threatened by, and that's why we saw the hard attack on her during her confirmation hearings with that famous, "It's so strange" line, "The dogma lives loudly within her."
Sure.
That'll go down in history, and now it might go down in history as the beginning of a Supreme Court justice's career.
Well, yet she was still confirmed with 55 votes. Leo, before I go to you, we're going to let Amy Coney Barrett speak for herself. She spoke to a group in Jacksonville, Florida. This is what she said about interpreting the Constitution. Listen.
To say, I want to appoint someone who's pro-life, or I want to appoint someone whose primary focus is protecting minority rights, though the candidates are talking to their bases and talking to the electorate and saying, signal, I'm going to put people on the court who share your policy preferences. As I was saying before, I think that's not the right qualification for a justice. I mean, we shouldn't be putting people on the court that share our policy preferences. We should be putting people on the court who want to apply the Constitution.
Applying the Constitution, Leo, what do you take issue with there?
We shouldn't put people on there who adopt or believe in the same policy. Let me tell you, have you read about this woman? I've read her before I came on your show. This woman does not believe in stare decisis. Carrie, you know what that means? She doesn't believe in established law. She is telling people that she has no problem overturning.
No, very bad.
No, excuse me, with all due respect, I don't think Roe versus Wade is a bad law. It's been on the books for about 45 years. But this, if you want to be honest, she is talking about overturning established law. That scares me as a lawyer. And Carrie, you didn't mention that. She also said in a speech that lawyers should have a higher calling to God. God has nothing to do with the law. This woman is scary. Very scary, because she's a threat to overturning established law. Carrie and Pete, I hope you talk about those items, because that's dangerous.
Well, you read, as I'm sure you did, like many Americans, looking at the Declaration of Independence yesterday. Of course, our founders believed in God, believed in nature's God. And there's been, you would acknowledge, Leo, there have been plenty of laws in this country that were on the books for 45 years that should have never been on the books in the first place. So take Roe v. Wade as an example, Carrie. There are a lot of folks who look at jurisprudence on the left and the right and say that the right found there in Roe v. Wade, they really had to bend over backwards to find that right to privacy within the Constitution. I believe it was penumbras formed by emanations on Roe v. Wade. Carrie, can you honor the Constitution without being ideological?
Absolutely, and that's what Amy Coney Barrett was talking about. It's not about finding someone who's going to give you a laundry list of preferences you want achieved. Every justice on the Supreme Court agrees that there are times when you have to overturn a law or a ruling that was incorrectly decided. If we didn't have that, we would still have the horrible Dred Scott case here, finding that black Americans could be slaves.
Don't play games.
It is correct to overturn precedents that are incorrect.
That's a red herring.
Why is that a red herring?
Let me just ask you point blank. Hey, Roe v. Wade, tell me right now on national television, bad decision? Tell me right now. Tell all the pro-choice Republicans, moderate Republicans. Tell me right now on national TV, is Roe v. Wade bad law?
Here and say that Lawrence, go ahead. I'll let you answer it yourself.
Lawrence Tribe, President Obama's legal advisor, a Harvard law professor, constitutional law textbook author, he thinks it is not a law that a precedent that is a good quality precedent. But the question here is very different. I don't think this justice is going to be of the vote to overturn Roe versus Wade, because the middle justice, the swing vote, is now Chief Justice John Roberts. I think he is much harder to predict, and I have no idea what he will do in this case.
Leo,
this is really a distraction.
Leo, there's a lot of people in this country that
believe
Roe v. Wade is terrible and abortion is a sin on this country. There's a lot of people that legitimately hold that policy view. There's also a lot of people, including my professor at Princeton University, Robbie George, who pointed out many times that the decision of Roe v. Wade, whether you're pro-life or pro-choice, was judicial activism at its finest.
You know, this
Pete,
debate
respectfully, when Kerry uses Dred Scott as an analogy, she insults the intelligence of every viewer. Now, you know,
Why?
Pete, since 1973, all the current administration, Republicans and Democrats, legislation has acknowledged Roe v. Wade. And this judge is hell-bent on overturning Roe v. Wade. She should not be nominated.
No, you're making it a single issue. I think the First Amendment, the Second Amendment, religious liberty,
it's a big issue.
Government overreach,
a woman's
the
right
10th
to
Amendment.
choose?
Of course it's a big issue, and it's one of the things that could come before the court. Are you saying it's not a legitimate policy position to believe that maybe it could be decided at the state level?
You know, I think all of this...
I'm telling you that this judge should believe in stare decisis. Don't you believe that, Kerry? Can you just say yes or no? It's very simple.
I absolutely believe in stare decisis, but no principles of stare decisis say that every case, once decided, never gets overturned. Zero justices in the Supreme Court believe that. This is all a distraction. These are scare tactics used against Justice O'Connor, Justice Kennedy, Justice Souter. They were saying they would be the vote to overturn Roe versus Wade. Those were the 3 votes that upheld Roe versus Wade in the Planned Parenthood case. It's a distraction from the real principles we're talking about here, which is this someone who's going to look at the law first and foremost, look at the Constitution first and foremost?
I'll tell you,
Amy Barrett, unlike many people, has written clearly.
One more big comment.
She believes her
comment. I read one of her speeches. And she said, I didn't understand this as a lawyer. She told a group of lawyers that we as lawyers have a higher calling to God. Can you explain that to me? Why is she injecting religion? I don't know what that means. I don't know as a lawyer. I don't know what that means.
Declaration of Independence. I think our framers may have said that too.
Again.
She is
Here we go
unique,
again.
though.
Here we go again. Back to our
she's unique
founding
that she's written
principles.
that. And she has said specifically, if her moral beliefs conflicted with her role as a judge, she said she would recuse herself. What else can you ask? She says specifically, I'm not going to substitute my moral beliefs for the law. The law comes first.
Indicative of the fact, these are going to be some confirmation hearings, no matter who is chosen. That'll be must-see TV. A good debate. Kerry, Leo, thank you for your time tonight. Appreciate it.